Hello, my name is Mark DiCarlo. Tonight my guest is Mr. David Aken, longtime San Patricio County Attorney. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
There's a new, thinner David Aken than what I traditionally knew for 30 years. You lost some weight. You had a health problem recently?
I did, and not a little one. I don't halfway do anything. I had a heart transplant.
And that is, I remember the first ones when I was a boy and hearing about them. Bakey? Was it Bakey? DeBakey, okay. DeBakey. And for years they weren't too successful. Now the last time I was reading about them that it's not uncommon for a heart transplant now to last 17 years. What are the statistics and what are you familiar with on these?
Well, once you make it through the surgery in the first 6 months, your lifespan really reverts to normal, and your chances are about the same as everybody else's. You'll lose somewhere from 9 to 14% per year, but a lot of us that receive transplants are in our 50s and 60s, so it's generally the norm, the normal lifespan.
Oh, that's great. How long has it been for you?
I'm 1 year in February.
Oh, great. Congratulations.
Thanks.
How did they find it? Did you have a heart attack, or how did they find this?
I had a ventricle defibrillation, which means the bottom part of my heart began to flutter. And just like your outboard motor, when it spins too fast and the prop cavitates, it does not move the fluid. So it wasn't that it stopped or that it tore, it's that it lost its rhythm.
So how long does the operation still take, like hours and hours on end on the operating table like it used to?
Well, a normal operation takes about 4 hours.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I keep messing with the mic.
The day all the things coincided for me and the donor organ arrived, and I'm on the gurney rolling into the operating room, and the hospital experienced its first generalized computer crash. Every computer in the hospital went down simultaneously. So my operation took a little longer, but was still successful while they were in about 6.5 hours.
I would have been so scared, having to go through something like that. And the other thing is that the David Aken I always knew looked pretty healthy, height, weight, proportionate, the whole deal. So I guess this kind of hit you from left field.
It did. But Mark, I also know what an active person you are, and after waiting for months, you'd have been ready to get it on or get it over, and so you're ready. You're definitely ready.
You have an opponent. You've been San Patricio County Attorney. I'm guessing because when I got here, about 30 years. I'm guessing.
32. This is my 32nd
Because I think
year.
when I came to town, you were the county attorney. And remember, I used to do a lot of juvenile court appointments over there.
I do recall.
Yeah. And I was younger, more emotionally volatile. Now it's much more controlled, right? We went through a lot of... You probably remember the time that I was jailed. You remember that, I think. I've heard you remembered it, just through the gossip.
I do.
By one of the JPs over there. But your office still handles juvenile cases, correct?
We do.
And you handled, in other words, when juveniles are accused of committing crimes of whatever nature. And obviously, I'm assuming that the number of juvenile crimes would have increased through the years.
Well, you would have been right up to a point, but things have gone well for us over the last few years. Our programs are working, and our juvenile referral rate has dropped significantly. Our overall rate decrease is 50% since 14. Each category has gone down. the one that stubbornly remains has been sexual assault, and the most difficult of offenses to try, and often the assaults are taking place within the family. But even that has gone down by a third.
That's great. Now you're saying they're the most difficult to try. I tell you, for the defense viewpoint, I do criminal defense, they're very difficult to try. The juries, in my mind, and I don't ask for an opinion on this, seem very, very prejudiced against anybody accused of such an assault. Why are they difficult from your end?
Well, Mark, you and I are both caring people, and we care about the victims.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's children involved by definition when it's a juvenile case. The families are just in complete torment, and there's just no happiness there at all.
But let's say this, because it's not. I don't think it's said enough. A lot of times these cases aren't nearly as heinous or as indicated by the media. A lot of times it's touching, and touching of a child is considered aggravated sexual assault. A lot of times you're kind of entering into this heart of darkness wherein the child maybe had been molested before, and it's not often that it's not common to see some sort of horrible forced rape of a child, forced anal sex, for example. It's more likely to be touching. Alcohol's involved. It's a family member or somebody the family member knows. Is that correct?
Well, for the juvenile part of it, which is what I know, it's not necessarily that, but it is often that the perpetrator has been a victim in his or her past, which is just doubly painful. And the sad thing about it all, or maybe the saddest, is that these are ripples that don't just immediately go away. That victim carries that, the perpetrator carries the guilt, and it's a very, very difficult process for both of them to recover from.
It's interesting you say that. I have seen men who've told me about their accusations as they're older, and they're usually very embarrassed to tell me. You know, they're very embarrassed to tell me that they were convicted of that. And the other thing that I've seen a lot of is people who come to me for Social Security disability that are about 45 to 55, men and women, that they have serious emotional problems. 90% of the time they were sexually, physically, or maybe seriously emotionally abused. And it seems like it comes back. And there's a reason. In other words, you could trace their depression to abuse. So I would agree on that. Now, when a child is accused of a sexual assault, how often do you do a certification to certify them as an adult and try them? Do you do that very often?
We do it when necessary. We have so many things that we look at. We look at the age of the child. We look at the support group for the child. We look at the severity and frequency of the attacks. So all of these different things that we look at. And on the good side for us in San Pat, it's rare enough that we don't have to set policies and just tick off like some policy. We get to actually examine this child and this situation.
It's interesting. One of the politically, and Mark Skirka was the DA, and there was all these complaints that I guess there was some perhaps justification for that they were using, as you're saying, objective criteria regarding cases instead of looking at the cases individually. Your office, you're saying again, is small enough that you could look at the cases individually and make a decision. I guess you ask opinions, or is juvenile probation involved in that also?
Absolutely, they are, and I attribute a lot of our success to their efforts.
Who's heading up the juvenile probation office now?
It's a new man, and
Marla Ruvalcaba handled it for years.
Marla was a warrior. She was there for many, many years.
Yeah.
And I knew her from the time she was an officer, and she ran a real good department.
She did?
Her and Mary Ann got a new modern detention facility built for San Patricio County, where we take in a lot of the children from the surrounding rural counties. Her and Mary Ann both have very successful tenures.
Mary Ann who?
Mary Ann Johnson.
Oh, Judge Johnson's wife?
Yes.
I thought that she had left.
Oh yeah, some time back.
Certainly.
She was still absolutely essential in getting the detention center built.
And just speaking, just generally, I've on the Texas. If a child is sentenced to the Texas Youth Commission, it's kind of unusual. Let's say that we have a kid that keeps getting in trouble, and then he's charged with something serious, sexual assault or whatever, and then he's sentenced to the Texas Youth Commission. Is that till they're 22? I've forgotten. That
is till they reach majority plus, so they're like 18 or so when they. And if you do a determinate sentence, then they'll be reevaluated at the time they complete their juvenile. And if they evaluate, they'll be released. If they evaluate incorrectly, then they'll be shipped over to the adult system.
One thing I've noticed is that, you know this to be the case. It's even in the law. Why juvenile law is a little bit more enjoyable than adult criminal law is because they're trying to help the juvenile.
Yes.
Primarily, correct?
Right. And the recidivism rate is so much lower for juveniles than adults. They are much less likely to reoffend after the system than adults are.
Well, I guess San Patricio is small enough of a county that they do take a preventive approach. The defense attorneys joke, you know how the adults do it. You get probation over there, then they want to send you, then you get safety if you're an adult, and so you wind up serving all this time through the safety, and then you wait to go to a bed. But I've heard, I'm assuming that that's in order to prevent, further recidivism on the part of the adults. I guess that's not fair to ask you about. On the CPS cases, as they still call it CPS, or have they changed the name again?
Family Protective Services.
I'm right in there. So what's the score on all these state agencies keep changing their name? The TDC, TDCJ, what's the score on that, David?
Well,
is that Orwellian or what? What is that?
I would joke with them about they're avoiding the Sunset Commission by keeping their name new.
The Sunset Commission is the commission wherein all these agencies in Austin are supposedly, they're actually eliminated unless they come forth with good purpose why they shouldn't be eliminated.
Yes, that's correct.
Of course, it takes some degree of sophistication to file a complaint against TDC or whoever it would be to file a complaint, but maybe more citizens should do that. So it's what's it called again now?
Family Protective Services.
Family Protective Services. They're the ones that could, in fact, file a lawsuit to terminate the parent-child relationship if the parent is not doing an adequate job of supervising the child. Do you do the termination? That's the most extreme, I'm assuming, of the actions that could be taken by Child Protective Services.
Yes.
Are you in charge of that, or is there a separate... Does somebody who worked for Child Protective Services do that? An attorney for Child Protective Services? I've forgotten.
No, we do those.
You do those?
We do.
When was the last time you did one of those?
Oh, we've done them this year.
You've done them this year?
Yeah.
Those are, you talk about traumatizing.
No, very, very.
Taking a child away from their parents, and then maybe all the I don't know. Is it usually if they take one, do they take them all?
Not necessarily, but it's quite common that the situation that's provoked the removal of one child will require the removal of the others.
And I would assume that that's done in more extreme circumstances, accusation of what? Of child molestation or something like that, ordinarily?
It's child endangerment or abandonment. The child's in danger or been abandoned by the parents.
Well, the abandonment, I assume, would be easy. Well, it could be a temporary abandonment, 60-day abandonment, 90-day abandonment, etc. Now, I understand that the parents are entitled to a free attorney for this cause of action, a court-appointed attorney, because it's a kind of a quasi-criminal cause of action, right?
Yes, sir.
So you file would you say it's more like a civil proceeding to terminate the parent-child relationship between parent and child, or is it more like a criminal proceeding? How would you term it?
Oh, civil type proceeding with petitions.
So when someone actually files a lawsuit and they state, here's the reason why we want termination of the parent-child relationship, and then I would assume then the parents have to actually file an answer or denial or affirmative defenses. Is that right?
Yes, and they have to request the counsel.
They have to request
yes.
a counsel, and
right.
They have to meet certain requirements if they don't have adequate money or funds to hire their own attorney.
Yes.
Okay.
And more importantly, the child gets an attorney to represent the child's best interest, and hopefully gets a CASA volunteer. CASA, I'm sorry, I got to talk about CASA.
Court-appointed special advocates for the children.
Oh, they are such a wonderful group, and the judges rely on them so much. We never have a CASA that the judge doesn't have them say their piece and listen so carefully. CASA came to San Patricio because I helped recruit them. Because way back in the day, we had kids that just kind of fell through the cracks. And when CASA is in the case, there's no falling through the cracks. They make sure that things move and move quickly. And all of us are happy to see a CASA volunteer involved with a case. But we don't have enough for every child to have a volunteer. So we're constantly recruiting. And I hope that those of you that may have the time, would look into such a thing. Because nobody's treated better in the courtroom than a CASA volunteer.
So you think the court-appointed special advocate group is a good group, worthwhile group, and you would encourage people, of course, to contact CASA, CASA, court-appointed special advocates to, in fact, join and be an advocate for children in these kind of juvenile proceedings?
Oh, absolutely I would, because they bring a fresh set of eyes. You worked your defense, and you
absolutely
had so many.
That's right.
And we have this kind of way we look at things because we've looked at the other 10,000 cases.
Absolutely. I told a client this week, we were preparing for trial and we were going to go to trial, and he said, well, what do you think? I said, well, let me tell you something. My objectivity comes into question too, because I've been talking to you for so long, and I'm totally into the defense, etc., and I'm believing you, and that's how I'm geared up. So I'm not totally objective. The attorney isn't totally objective either. So what qualifications are there for a CASA?
There's a screening and training process that they go through with the CASAs, and I know Page Hall is very thorough. By the time a CASA rep gets into the courtroom, they'll also have a staffer with them until they get used to it. That they've been thoroughly trained and vetted and been through interview processes.
The CASA volunteers don't get any money.
Oh, no, it's a volunteer.
They're not paid. One of the things we did, I don't usually do this, but somehow it's obviously very easy for me to have attorneys and judges, et cetera, on the show. So we were talking about different issues, and I think you said something about changing subjects about the sheriff's office. Statewide, the sheriffs are concerned or upset that the criminal justice system is being used as a dumping ground for mental health people for people with mental health problems. And then, of course, I opine that, well, it's not only a dumping ground for people with mental health problems, but also they're dumping domestic violence problems on the criminal justice system, and they're addressing, the drug problems, and it's all arguable. But what did you want to say about the sheriffs in particular who were upset about the using the criminal justice system regarding curing or treating people with mental health problems?
Well, I think that they're getting fed up with it, frankly. I mean, the largest mental health facility in the state of Texas is the Harris County Sheriff's Office's jail. And if they're having trouble, I'm sure that Nueces County is having problems with it. My sheriff has problems with it. And they know that there are inmates that just don't belong. And it's ineffective to try to treat a mental health patient with jail. It's not going to work. And yet that is how we have defaulted in this state. When I became county attorney in 1984, we had beds available for civil commitments, and we did them all the time. But the patient would be transported and would remain in care for a month and a half. Well, now, if there is a bed available, and there probably isn't because we haven't added any beds since 1984, and it's an awful situation. The criminal commitments are taking up all the beds. So this has got to be addressed, and it appeared to me at the last Texas Association of Counties meeting that I went to that the sheriffs are getting organized, and that they're going to be addressed in the legislature in this upcoming session.
Well, I hate to speak too much about politics. I believe you're running as a Democrat, correct?
I am.
And you have a Republican opponent. And I hate to editorialize too much, but I would have to state that, I do think that the Republican Party is largely responsible for this idea that we're going to get tough on crime. Remember.
Sure.
Get tough on crime, and you get tough on crime, and that therefore, you reduce the number of treating facilities, et cetera, because they cost more money. And the problem is then, like many of these problems are then dumped, as you're saying, on the criminal justice system. I too remember when you had more facilities, obviously, to treat people.
Yeah.
The San Antonio State Hospital, I think, is still being primarily utilized here, correct? In other words, they would send people to San Antonio State Hospital for now it's sometimes only a matter of days they send them up there, correct?
Yes, it is only a matter of days. I wish this was simple enough for me to blame it on somebody's political party, but I really don't think it's quite that simple. The very disease of mental illness is one that it's so difficult to grapple with, because all of our other diseases, we have symptoms that show. Fevers and colds, the kinds of things we're associated that we recognize, they all have something that you can see. And mental illness doesn't show those kinds of symptoms. And we still have not washed that stigma from these diseases. And there's no lobby, there's no informative group that goes to the legislature every year and really floods the legislature with requests. We can't understand the battle for legislative time because we're not legislators, and really neither one of us are wanting to be legislators. So if there's no one there to grapple for that time and to push the issue forward, it's going to slide to the back of the pack. And I think that's more what's happened than some deliberate indifference on because of party.
I thought it was actually a political philosophy that was dictating that, look, we can't mollycoddle people. These programs don't work anyway. that therefore, we'll just, I thought it was a little bit of a political philosophy that I've kind of been disappointed in some respects, wherein there's simple solutions to problems. I thought there was, but that's editorializing. But let's talk about domestic violence. This has gotten a lot of publicity in Nueces County through the newspaper the last 6 months. And I've made jokes about it in these social networks. I said they can't fix the streets, and they're going to solve the domestic violence problems. The Caller Times says to the police and to the district attorney's office to do something. What are they going to do? The idea that I've also editorialized, I said, look, I don't know what more they could do than what I've seen them personally do with my own eyes: reset cases again and again of people who are accused of domestic violence, obviously 90 to 95% men, maybe 90% or whatever. They reset them. The victim doesn't want to cooperate, etc. You do, in fact, pursue a certain number, the misdemeanor domestic violence cases, those would be what, the simple assaults?
Simple assault, assault with bodily injury, but not life-threatening or disfiguring.
Okay. I shouldn't laugh, God forbid, this is awful, but they've got this new law wherein, if you put any choking is a felony. So I made a joke, said, don't choke, but hit. No, I know. That's awful. That's awful. I know, but you just put your hand, so you use your fist, but no, that's awful. But so you do a fair number of those. And you have, I'm assuming, the same problem a lot of the prosecutors have, wherein the victim signs a non-prosecution affidavit. I don't want to prosecute. Oh, and then the defense attorney always hears, my wife's not going to appear in court. She's not going to appear in court. And then you've got the guys searching them down with subpoenas, the victims, etc. Is that a problem? Are those some of the issues, or you don't see that?
Of course, yes, it is a problem. And it's so hard to get a conviction when you don't have a witness. Just bordering on impossible. But what a problem, because it transcends all of the boundaries that we know. It transcends race, it transcends economics. There's no defining group that you can say, well, this is this group's problem. It's really all through society a problem. We do, in addition to just prosecute the crime, if the victim will just come forward, we'll do a protective order for her and order the man to stay away from her entirely. And then if we have a witness that he just shows up where she is, it might not even have to be the victim, but if the protective order is in and granted, then we can keep him away from her. But we have the same kind of problem with those that you're having here in Nueces County with ladies changing their minds. They have a conflation between love and fear, and it's a terrible, terrible conflict that goes on inside them. Feel for them.
Well, I will say this. I shouldn't do this so much, but I think it's fair to the audience too sometimes to expand the scope of the conversation. You've got no fault divorce, which a lot of religions didn't believe in. You've got 90-day divorce, which a lot of religions didn't believe in. Now they're saying, okay, that's not good enough. 90-day, no fault divorce. Now it's not easy enough to get divorced. Now the state's going to step in and regulate your relationship. I remember, and again I'm editorializing. I remember years ago one of my, I think it was actually an aunt, older aunt would say, kind of a tough northern accent, the door swings both ways, Buster. So I don't know how much protection you could give to these women. We've heard the refrain for the last 30 to 40 years that women are the same, women are equal, women are just as good. Now they're saying, well, I guess we're not. We need protection. So the social policy reasons, which are unfair for me to really discuss with you, I think run pretty deep.
No, and just, Mark, we still have different bodies, and we still have different anger issues. And if the man is the physically more powerful, and he
you would hear women say that's not true too, David. I had a woman attorney on the show recently. She said, "Woman," I said, "No." I said, "I don't agree with that." I said, if I had a daughter, I know about bone density, muscularity. No, I don't think women are the same as men, but they will disagree with that at times. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. And God has blessed us all with individuality, and you can't put a rule out there and say that this is going to apply to everybody. It's pretty difficult to even try to sort folks into groups. But in the standard battle that I see the man usually prevails in those physical battles, and the woman loses. And it happens enough to where she will be able to see it building up. And what kind of horror must that be for her, that the man I love is going to be hitting me here sometime in the next few minutes or a few hours, because I'm not really getting beat up because the eggs aren't cooked right. I'm getting beat up for something else. And there's times that she'll just trigger it and go off just to get it over with. And it is a horrifying situation.
The whole thing is horrible, and I've represented many of the men through the years. It's just horrible to get, but I never hear that sometimes it's never to be justified. I mean, obviously, none of us would want to hit anyone or whatever. That's normal, unless you're a little bit off. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And then you hit somebody maybe to whatever. If anybody's pushed hard enough. But has anybody ever addressed the issue that are a lot of times women can antagonize? Do they ever antagonize men, insult them, or degrade them? Do you see that ever as an issue, or is that never an issue?
It's never justification for getting beat up. It just isn't. The man can leave. He can do what he needs to do to avoid that, and he should.
I'll tell you, I don't have a good psychological understanding about what's going on with these inner dynamics myself, and it would seem that they're both being very miserable in their situations. They're not happy. They're both very miserable, and that one of them would need to make a decision, some sort of intelligent decision, and neither one of them can do that. So you do the domestic violence cases. Those are fairly common cases. What are the other I think we had also discussed briefly that you've seen a great increase in the amount of what we refer to as synthetic marijuana cases over there in San Patricio County. And what is the score? What is synthetic marijuana? Is it more dangerous than regular marijuana? What is your stance on if you have one, or you think you want to state one, on the legalization of marijuana?
Well, legalization is for the legislature, not for prosecutors. But this synthetic stuff, first, I'm really unsure that it mimics marijuana at all, because the psychological impacts and the episodes that it causes are completely unlike anything you'd ever imagine from organic marijuana. And what is it? It's something different with every packet. This stuff is made. It's said a lot of it is made in China and shipped over in barrels and then just sprayed on some kind of herbaceous concoction and just sprayed like with somebody with a paint gun. So over here in the corner it may be really intense, and here in the middle it may be something different. And the young people are using it because of the cost and the availability, but they're having these psychotic episodes where they just are not a person anymore. They're just some wild animal. And then passing out is part of it, and convulsions. It's a hideous thing to see. And I do want to thank the legislature for making it easier for us to pursue these cases. They've greatly expanded our abilities in the last year or so to handle these cases and to take them in. Our county now has a 90-day inpatient program where someone can go in and get drug treatment for 90 days. And nobody in the world can afford such a thing on their own. But a lot of our users are so addicted that they'd rather do jail time where they can get good time and get out quicker, and that's all they seem to care about. But some of our folks are taking us up on that program, and it's been successful. We're very proud of it.
I don't mean on a later subject. Yeah, I know a lot of the young kids that'll have a possession of marijuana, and I'll tell them, look, could you do probation? Could you? Some of them can't, because they want to keep smoking, regular marijuana, and that's fairly common. I actually know a prosecutor who says, therefore, the legalization of marijuana because of the fact that they think it would prevent people from doing synthetic marijuana. Is there any do you think there's any validity in that issue?
Oh.
Again, some of this is unfair. That's not really your job.
You're going to have a cost factor, and right now, these chemicals are working on different types of receptors, and I wish I had a pharmacological background so I could tell you. And they may actually be affecting the brain in different ways, so that the people that have used and become steady users of the synthetic wouldn't even be interested in the organic.
Yes, that sounds likely. That's a good point too.
But I really don't think prosecutors should get too enamored with that type of theory, because that's not what we're supposed to do. We are supposed to prosecute the law as it's written by our legislators.
Well, yes, I will tell you something though. How do I say this? Without getting anybody in trouble. In certain counties, marijuana in Texas has basically been legal in this regard for years. First time you get caught, pretrial diversion, which which would mean that you would be put on a period of probation, and your case would be wiped clean if you don't do it again. Now, some prosecutors making that decision, and you know that you have a lot of discretion, you have a lot of choice in how you prosecute a case and what you offer. And I'm saying certain counties in Texas and certain other counties said we're going to be hard on marijuana, and other ones have said we're going to be soft on marijuana. We're going to give pretrial diversion. Maybe because of I've opined that maybe it's based upon the district attorney's own experience with the drug. I don't know, but you guys have a lot of discretion.
We do,
and that's never discussed. People tell me all the time. They go, "Well, when in our discussions, I often tell my clients, the judge is not really the judge. The prosecutor, in many respects, is the judge. The prosecutor makes the plea bargain to you. I speak to the prosecutor. 95% of the time, the judge is going to go along with the prosecutor's recommendation and the defense attorney's recommendation, and it won't get to the judge. So I think that I want to be clear. You guys, the district attorneys, county attorneys hold a tremendous amount of choice, discretion in terms of how to prosecute cases, plea bargains, etc., correct?
Oh, yes. Yes, we do. And pretrial diversion is something that I strongly believe in. It's good for the defendant in that it gives him a chance to change his behavior and keep something off of his record so he can advance in life. And it's good for the state of Texas to have successful citizens that can go on and build lives and own property and not be a burden to the state. So I do believe in those things. And you've got to look at every one of them. Every pretrial diversion that was done for many years by my office, I looked at it. I talked to the person. If they were there with their family, I talked to their family, because I had more experience of dealing with defendants than anybody else in my office, because I've been doing it for 20 plus years. And if it works, it's a fabulous thing for the state of Texas. But it takes very, very careful observation and investigation into the background of who you're talking to. And nobody's perfect. It's not always going to work. But our pretrial diversion is not only the best probation program that our probation department has, it's even better than the statewide average of diversion programs.
So you have statistics?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure.
To back all that up?
Oh, yeah. My probation department, quite proud of those statistics.
It'd be interesting. I didn't know that you kept statistics on, et cetera. Do you keep... What are the statistics? This is changing subjects, but since I've never heard it, on San Antonio State Hospital, which San Patricio County likes to use. Have you ever read the statistics on the effectiveness of that program?
No, I have not. I'm not sure of what statistics you'd be able to keep.
Right.
Maybe did you have to commit this person again? Would be the statistic you would be looking for. I really haven't.
Let's say on SAFE-P, Substance Abuse Felony Punishment Treatment Facility, which you like a lot over there.
I do.
I meant the county likes it.
Yes, we
generally,
do.
San Patricio County likes it. It would seem like there would be statistics. Apparently they keep using it. Now, there are some people that insinuate that the county somehow makes money off of sending people to to that program.
No.
You don't believe that's true?
No, I do not. No, we're not a for-profit county.
Okay. So on SAFE-P then, you don't know the recidivism. I mean, I guess you could objectify it. What is the recidivism rate after maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years?
Absolutely. Those statistics exist.
They do exist?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that comes up with my clients a lot is that when we started practicing, you remember before before computer databases?
Yes.
People, they could lie to me about whether or not they had a prior DWI, and half the time the state would never find it, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
But now, I would say an actual criminal charge or a conviction has 10 times the penalty that it used to have, because it exists on computer databases in perpetuity and it's more publicly found. So when I think that pretrial diversion in a way is a reaction to that, because if you have somebody 18 years old and they get this whatever misdemeanor or felony on their record, everybody could find it. Everybody could find it the rest of your life. You're not losing it if you move to Louisiana or Ohio or Pennsylvania. You've got it. And it's kind of onerous now since they've gone to the computer databases, don't you think?
It is, and this is one of the areas where, the great thing about pretrial diversion is that the people that go through that system are the sole support of the system. Their fees pay for the whole thing, so our taxpayers aren't paying to support that system. But what we have going on is that while they're on that program, data miners are out there hunting to create this private criminal history on them.
There you go. And I wasn't even aware of that, but I have told people that there's an argument now that there basically is no expungement of an arrest record. There is, because somehow if it's ever on that net, it will be found. Because it's stored somehow.
Yes, it's something that I explain to every parent that comes in there, because I can look at that young person and I can tell that they are not going to be able to remember what these people are saying to them. They're so nervous.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the good thing about pretrial diversion. It's, a deferred, you finish up, you got to wait 2 years to do that expungement. Well, that's all this time these data miners can get in there and defeat the whole purpose. Pretrial diversion, they can expunge as soon as they're successful in completing the program. And I encourage everybody that comes through there, please don't forget about this. I know it's going to take some money, but it's going to save you money, because if this gets out there and your credit score can be affected. So you go to
I didn't even know that.
Oh, you go to buy your car, it can affect your credit score.
The other thing that people don't quite understand is even if they're arrested and the case is dismissed, they will have that record of arrest the rest of their life unless they file an expungement. And unfortunately, an expungement is not necessarily that. People ask me, can I do it on my own? Well, if you got about 20 hours to bring yourself up to speed and figure out where to file it, and then you could approach the judge, and then because in all honesty, even for my office, it's not that easy. You have to, for example, that on an expungement, all the different agencies have to be served,
yes,
before you could set it for a hearing, and then you have to set it for a hearing, etc. And so it's not an easy procedure.
Yeah, I think a citizen's going to need help to do that. It's so complicated.
The other thing is, you've been a little bit involved. We were talking about the show before the show briefly about the wind turbines you have over in San Patricio County, and how you have a different attitude than what we've had here in Nueces County. And you consider them to be relatively, and you're involved in the community, and I guess you're very happy San Patricio County is doing well through some of the new factories that are being built, through the wind farms, et cetera. So why don't we talk a little bit about economic development over there, since you've been a longtime resident?
I have, and I started digging through my old campaigns when this campaign came up. And in 1984, one of the statements that the newspapers were running of mine was that we need to expand our tax base and our job opportunities. Well, finally, I'm actually being successful with that. We're booming. But yeah, the wind turbines, we really don't understand Nueces County's outlook on them. For us, our history involves family farms. And all of us are pretty loyal to family farms and family farmers. And the wind turbines opportunity came up, and it was going to benefit the schools. It was going to make our family farmers, help make them self-sufficient. Even in a bad year, they're still going to have something happening. It's not a resource that's going to go away like oil or gas, going to get pumped out and be gone someday. So and that's not even mentioning the renewable aspects and the fact that it's clean energy. They were welcomed when they arrived in San Patricio County, and they've been great citizens. There was some skepticism at first among the farmers, but they've watched those farms that have turbines continue to produce crops and be successful, and now they're heartily embraced by our farming community and our citizens. It adds an air of modern to our county. We're a very historical county. We existed back in the Republic days, and so we see that, and it gives us a little touch of the modern to go in, and it's helped us. It's helped us recruit new business, international companies, and our job base is expanding tremendously, and our tax base will double or quadruple in the next 8 years, which will help us all keep our taxes low. And we're very excited about these coming days. And it's really been an honor to serve with my commissioner's court on the negotiating teams with the companies that are looking at coming into us.
Okay, so there's Chinese pipe factory, Italian styrofoam company. There's an Austrian company.
Yes.
And then there's another company, right?
There's the Austrians. There's Cheniere, which is multinational. They're going to have a huge project that they're putting on. Exxon is looking at a gigantic project which could put 200 to 400 jobs, long-time permanent jobs, and these are jobs that are working wage, living wage, raise a family wage, where the you're making $60,000 to $80,000 a year working in the plant, not supervising it, working in it, and it's going to be a real. It's going to change our communities, and really both communities, Nueces and Sampat.
What about these rumors that I've heard that the Chinese aren't going to bring any jobs? There was some sort of an agreement made that if there was like some sort of prevailing wage, if they couldn't hire people at the prevailing wage, then they were going to be able to bring over all these people from China, and they're going to be living in their own housing, so they're not going to contribute to the community at all. I've heard that a couple times. Is that right?
No, it's incorrect. We do have jobs. You can't name a job that there isn't an American available to fill. And for China to bring over one worker, every year they're going to have to renew his HB1 or HB2, and there are only so many HB2 temporary immigration folks that are granted. It's going to be a constant battle for them to try and fill jobs with those workers, and our workers will get those jobs. And in some of them, we were even able to get agreement that a certain percentage of the jobs would live in Sampat County, and that anything they bought, the concrete, the rebar, the steel, would come from our area, Sampat and Nueces County. Those products would come from our area.
And then I've heard too that some of the factories, they'll bring a lot of them, more a general discussion, they're going to bring a lot of pollution, et cetera, but because of the way factories now are mechanized, that there's going to be very few people in these huge factories. So the actual number of employees versus pollution and tough aspects on the infrastructure isn't going to be that much. Is that right too?
Mark, the way we have won these factories is by being in air attainment. Nueces and Sampat County are at half the pollution levels of Houston. We have deep water and clean air, and that has brought us the businesses that we're getting, and we're not going to sell that out. When there was a project over here that was going to be a coal type plant that was going to threaten our air quality, and my goodness, what a grassroots opposition to that rose up, and from our county too.
There was.
And that got stopped, and what a blessing that has been to all of us that are here.
Yeah. I don't know. I wasn't. Sometimes I will say this, since we're talking politics. Sometimes the left, they get a little bit extreme. I'm not for wind farms because the way they look. I'm not for oil. I'm not for coal. I'm not for. They get ridiculous too. So I didn't know about that. I think it was coal tar or something. What do they call that?
Pet coke.
Pet coke, right?
What
right.
They were which was in here.
But then I think that it actually was it maybe a state or government agency prevented them from coming. It wasn't the local politicians, I think, that actually prevented them from coming.
Clean Cities had a part of it. There were so many groups that were involved in opposing that, and there was no jobs at stake. There just wasn't any upside for it. And the whole thing just fell apart as soon as it had, got the light of day on it.
So, Mr. Aken, county attorney, longtime county attorney, even though he's had some health problems, you desire to run again? You want to keep your job? Do you have any plans for the future? Why do you want to keep it? Any last thoughts? We have about 5 minutes.
Well, it just doesn't feel like a job. It feels like if I won the lottery, I'd take a couple of weeks off. But
that's you know what it is, David. Let's face it, man. This is all we know. It's all we know, man. There's nothing else. All we is the action, and that's your life. It becomes your life, doesn't it?
It's so enjoyable. We must have a character flaw sometime.
Well, I don't
it.
know. Some people, they can sit at. I talked to a doctor one time at one of my Social Security hearings from San Antonio, and he was obviously old enough to retire, and assumably, I said, well, "Why don't you retire?" He said, "I can't stay at home."
I can stay home, could stay home, but this is where I'm supposed to be, and my county still needs me. We're in this boom time, and this is when things have got to be managed correctly, because our quality of life needs to stay good. We can't swap our quality of life just for growth's sakes. That's for cancer cells. That's not for Sampak County. We've got to be responsible. We've got to stay on these things, make sure they're clean and safe, and that all of us live here are benefited by it.
Okay. Wanted to thank you for coming on. This has been Mr. David Aken, longtime San Patricio County attorney, up for election again. Thanks for coming on, David.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Good night.